much. And of course, thank you, Dr. Edwards. I love the opportunity to be able to talk to the people who are interested in the Humanities Center. And I think the most fascinating thing about it is that it's not only faculty, graduate students, undergrads, but I think word goes out all over campus. Oh, come on. No, come on. Word goes out all over campus, and I think we all come with different needs and different interests, and I think that's what's so much fun about it, is because it's a place where we can all talk to each other and really share ideas. So, Dr. Edwards, having said all those really nice things about my scholarship, this is not an extremely scholarly talk. This is going to be very much impressions. And what I wanted to kind of do was get frank with our users to a certain extent. Primarily faculty, and you'll find out why in a little bit. But I think a lot of times when you come in contact with a librarian, they're very focused on a particular, issue, question, problem, goal that you've got, or we're in essence selling something. We have a new service, we have a new resource, something that we want to familiarize you with. I think having more forums where we actually talk in general about what we can do, what your needs are, and exchange that information and keep building on it is a really important thing that we need to do. And I think it's a direction that you're going to see the librarians, particularly on this campus, going in more aggressively than we have in the past, is kind of what I'm thinking. So the first thing I want to do is have you do a little bit of work, okay? Let me get going here on my technology. Let's see. There are sticky notes all around the tables. And I have, there are actually 5 secrets here that I'm going to impart. And I've got flip charts for each of those. I knew that this room wasn't very conducive to doing work on flip charts, so that's okay. We're only going to use the flip charts to gather sticky notes at this point. If we have enough time and we can talk about them, we'll put the chart up. But I don't think we'll have to necessarily do that. The first thing that I want to do is make sure that you're sticky note ready. So I want you to take a sticky note. Even if you've signed in, I want you to put your name, your email address, department, major, discipline, where you fit in the academic community. And I want to know how you heard about this presentation. If it reached you by several different means, be sure you put the first one, and then, you can do multiple ones if you want. But everybody needs to be able to get going with their sticky notes, just in case. The other thing that I want to encourage you to do is that the topics that I'm going to be presenting are kind of a taxonomy for us to be able to talk about, hopefully, a whole lot of different issues. So as things occur to you, jot it down on a sticky note, okay? If we're on a particular point, you might want to say secret 1 or number 1 or something on it, but no more detail than that. You can sign them if you wish. You certainly don't need to. And what I promise to do is the input that I get from you, I will be sure that it either goes out on a list or a place that's in a fixed medium that I can point you to, and we'll share what those are. Okay, so even if you don't particularly raise the topic in a question or in the discussion or anything, it can still be part of what we learn and exchange here. Okay, and that's really kind of what I'm after. So again, name, email address, department, major, or discipline, and then how you heard about the presentation. And I think I've got some sheets out there that remind people, so if there's any latecomers, if you can just kind of pass one to them. And so, the very first secret that I wanted to impart to you is, my shorthand for it, is that the library is in the cloud. And we're going to get some very technologically oriented people here who are going to say, oh, no, it's not. That's not what they mean by the cloud. I think what I wanted to do by saying that it is in the cloud is to say that it's not so much a physical entity anymore. I don't think that's news to anybody here. We've all dialed in, used the libraries electronically, and I think with mixed, number one, with mixed results, but also with mixed feelings about it. A lot of us, I think, still certainly have an association with print that we don't necessarily want to totally give up. I know there's a lot of things I do electronically, and there's some things I still like to do in print. And I think a lot of us are like that, probably to one extent or another. And the cool thing about it is, I don't think at this point that it's necessarily one or the other. In other words, I don't think that we're necessarily giving up print to go to electronic. Yes, you're going to have some things that aren't available in print, but it's also possible to get print frequently if that's the medium that you prefer, and if there's a reason for why you want to do that. I have a lot of things that I'll look at electronically through the library's catalog and maybe look at a table of contents to know whether or not I want to wait to get that book through interlibrary loan, to know whether or not I want to go up to the stacks to get it, okay? I don't think it's necessarily an either or, and that you have to worry about print going away at this point. I think it's how to kind of strategically use both of them. People are going to differ in how they do this, and it's librarians' jobs to find out how they use information, okay? Because we need to keep working to empower users to be able to do what they need to do. In the print world, in the electronic world, communicating with each other, everything about the academic environment, about scholarly communications, and about the library is changing very rapidly. Okay? We in the library have trouble sometimes keeping up with that. We know you do. Remove that once again. If you're in a classroom and you're the instructor, your students also are coping with that, and sometimes they're even further removed from the type of news and communication that's happening all the time on campus. Okay, so that's a concern too. Certainly, what we currently buy in books and journal subscriptions and online databases are provided to you increasingly in electronic format because that's how they're produced. That's how they're basically the cheapest. Okay, both to be produced and for us to obtain and distribute to you. So there is an economic model built into most of the things that I'm going to point out. A lot of items are purchased, but even more items are licensed. In other words, we don't own them. We can use them, but we don't own them. And that's another piece of the economics, but that's in there too. And it changes the way we use information to some extent. Certainly our catalog, or how we index what we provide to you, is electronic. And most of the information that we provide that's extraneous to the catalog, okay? So our policies and procedures, renewing books, reference services, all of these things have electronic iterations, okay? Even if it's not exclusively electronic, there's usually an electronic option at this point. Okay, we're still very transitional on those things. We can also include a whole lot of really high quality, freely available electronic information in this whole electronic setup. And I do think that's a benefit. Okay, a lot of free information that we never really thought about, we kind of took for granted before, can be included in this and kind of incorporated into the whole scholarly information equation. Now the other thing is, because the data can be managed electronically, we no longer select books in advance on a title-by-title basis. So one of the roles that you might have associated with librarians, I know I did, was the idea that they would go through catalogs, read reviews of things, talk to vendors about the new things they have coming out, and that they would select what the library wants to buy. Some of that goes on. I would say it's a decreasing activity for the most part. Not that we're not exposed to it, but it's not the main way that the library gets information. We do, however, craft profiles, okay, that describe in detail to vendors what subject areas we will lease, sight unseen, and with an associated discount. But it's basically the way that most large academic libraries are doing business anyway. And the whole idea is to match that profile, that thing that describes to the vendor what we want, to what our users' needs are. Okay. Now think about that. What that puts on the librarian is the need to go out there and find out in pretty fine detail what users are using, what they need, okay, and be able to do that sort of matching and kind of shape that profile to best serve them. Okay, so it's a little bit of a different activity, but you can see how even with automation, the old roles do go away, but the new roles change. It's a different activity, but it's still being done, and it's still being done by professional librarians, okay? We no longer attempt to build comprehensive collections. Let's see, I was trained as a librarian in the mid-'80s. Even by that point, I think we had seen the cost of information and the amount of information explode to such a degree that no library could aim to collect it all, okay? Not the Library of Congress, not Harvard, not even the British Library. Some of our very largest libraries still could not do that. Their budgets were not increased to match the huge amount of information that was being produced. And just by sheer volume, it was impossible to really, keep a handle on that and create extremely comprehensive collections. We do have particular collections out there that are built to try to be comprehensive, but I think the recognition is that they pretty much aren't. They can't be because things are just being produced so quickly. On-demand access is pretty much the next best thing. And you may discover materials that you decide you want inside or outside the library, okay? Actually, that activity's always happened. We've always had people who were using a bibliography in a book, saw it in a bookstore, et cetera, et cetera. So all of the needs for what you'll want don't come from within the library, and we recognize that. An on-demand model means that you're going to request it, okay? You have to be able to describe it, and then you're going to have to wait for it. The bad news, right? Everybody hates that. The thing is, we are concentrating a lot of our activities that we do, measurements and things, decisions that we make on speeding that up whenever we can. Very little of it actually relies on physical delivery at this point. When you need a whole book that the library hasn't purchased in the past and for whatever reason is not purchasing currently to meet your need, which can be a variety of things. It could be out of print, it could be not available at the time, exorbitantly expensive, things like that. We can still get things from other libraries. And that really is the most of the physical movement that we need, that we do. Just about everything else is done electronically. Smaller pieces of information, chapters of books, articles, you're going to get electronically, and you're going to get it pretty quickly. And there's a lot of studying and effort being put on keeping those systems fast and responsive to you. Okay? The second point that I wanted to raise, let me see here, I've got some documentation. We don't need that. Is that not only is the library in the cloud, but so are the librarians. Okay? The model of people coming physically to the library and talking to a librarian face to face is simply not the prevalent model anymore. Okay? There are librarians there. We still, again, we don't get rid of all of our legacy services as long as we're in that transition period. I wouldn't even predict at this point whether a physical reference desk will ever ultimately go away. Part of me says no. I think scholars still visit. I think they need face-to-face support. But that's the environment we're in now. Well, it's hard to say what's going to happen there in the future. But reference work has changed. I don't have to be in the library anymore to be a pretty good reference librarian. Okay? And in fact, because I'm not relying on the print resources, I'm probably a better reference librarian when I'm not in the library. We accept the questions themselves by email and by chat so that we're interacting directly. We also can access just about everything the library offers electronically remotely. Okay, so that's a big help. True, we're going without the physical items, but what we're finding is that increasingly they are less and less of the proportion of the collection that we use, okay? The other really exciting thing that I think that the fact that librarians are in the cloud kind of points up is that we don't have to stay in our offices. We're not place-bound. We can go to where our users need us. And I found that to be a really kind of an exciting and freeing thing to be able to chase patrons around wherever they might need us. What I've been doing in Manoogian up until this summer is I had been holding reference hours. The interesting thing is I couldn't post them in the building. I could only post them electronically. They had a lot of they had a brand new lobby and they didn't want anything posted up there, and I kind of said, well, I really want to advertise these hours, and nothing kind of came up. So what I would do is put it electronically everywhere I could. I had some things in elevators and places like that, but for the most part I tried to get as close to students as I could, and that really meant sitting in their lounge where they ate, where they computed, where they talked to each other, certainly not a quiet place. And I was there with my computer and a little stand-up sign that said, hey, I'm a librarian. Okay. When it started out, I'd say that it averaged maybe one question every couple of hours. However, what I found is as I involved myself in what was going on around me, I would help people collate something if they had it. I would engage them in a conversation about the class they were taking and things like that, without being aggravated, mind you. But what I started to do was gain more and more insight into how they were using information. And that made me able to talk more and more about the library services, the sorts of things we could do that would help them, that would be an option for them. And I kind of think that's what it's all about right now with librarians. We can do everything electronic, that's almost the easy part. I think the more challenging part is engaging with people to find out exactly what they need and to share with them the possibilities that we have. It's a back and forth activity. Every time they know we have a capability, then they start asking questions. Would it fit this need? And it kind of goes back and forth. And to me, that's the excitement of it, is that we can be out there. I'm also very interested in being able to kind of provide information services at events. And I think that's something that we haven't historically done in the past as much as we could. If there's a conference, if someone else is giving a presentation and we happen to attend, is it handy for a librarian to be there? Is it handy for them to have the personal equipment with them to be able to answer questions on the spot? Frequently it is, not all the time, but yeah, it's pretty easy to just kind of be that ubiquitous librarian that's kind of there in the background. The more we trigger people to think about librarians, what they do, what they represent in information, I think the more it occurs to individuals to go to library websites, okay, to ask that question electronically. And so there is a certain amount of advertising, I guess, I prefer to think of it more as awareness, that we do just in being ourselves and being out there in the field and engaging with people in a knowledgeable way. The third thing is that we reach our students through faculty, okay? And right away I even look at this and I kind of think to myself, oh, no we don't. All of our students, everybody just comes to us directly. They all don't go through faculty. But I think it's extremely important in the academic environment that faculty helps with that role of facilitating what their students are going to experience as they ask questions, as they engage with academic materials, as they pursue their own academic goals. I can't think of a better way for a faculty member to create an atmosphere of real scholarship in their classroom than to include the librarian in that conversation. And the libraries in general, but also the idea that there is this intermediary. I don't think most of our services are designed to require a librarian's presence, but the ability to develop those services and to further them to better meet needs is totally dependent on the people that design them and that interact with them and keep pushing that envelope to make them better and make them more responsive to users' needs. This is kind of fun. Last fall, I did a little newsletter, and I kind of put on my thinking cap, and I thought, okay, if I was going to tell faculty how to get me into your classroom, what would I do? And the first thing I thought of is faculty don't want to give up any of their teaching time to me, and I don't blame them one bit. I'm in a class right now, and it is chock full. The minute we walk in that door until 5 minutes after it, when people are surrounding the professor, we're learning, okay? There's no time to put a librarian in there. So I kind of made a couple proposals. One of them is what I call the stick my head in the door meeting, where we basically walk into a physical classroom, assuming it is a physical classroom, introduce ourselves and simply say, I'm a librarian, here's what I do, call me, okay? Emails, contact information, whatever it is. What I'm finding is that we are just about at the level where we can encounter a freshman student who has not had an experience in a library physically, and therefore the old model that we have, that we usually talk to them about using books, using journals, things like that, it doesn't really fit. It doesn't really describe what we're doing, okay? The idea of a faculty kind of pushing that at them and kind of saying, wait a minute, in academia, this is what we do. We have libraries. Do you engage with materials this way? Bringing up evaluative points and things like that is very, very important. So I kind of proposed the 5-minute idea. The other one that I do, because I'm in a whole lot of different languages that I really don't understand, I'd say, oh my God, I probably technically cover about 14 languages. I actually have some knowledge of, I think I'm coming up on 4 of them right now. I'm in the 2nd term of German. So my facility with these things is not very great. What I have discovered is that if I can pick the brain of the faculty member who wants me to do an information session, I can find out a lot of stuff. I can give them more detailed information about how to do that presentation in a way that's going to be meaningful to the students. Not only by the insight of what the language and the country area covers, but also what's that assignment? What is their goal? Okay, what is it they need to know? It's still very dependent on faculty. With that information, it's possible that I can create an environment for general learning, places where I can suggest databases that they use. I can put up a lot of free information, especially like from different governments and associations and things like that. And I can create a nice environment for them to kind of go in and explore and discover. But as far as that hands-on, goal-based, objective type of teaching, that needs to happen still through the faculty. And being able to get a handle on that is the biggest challenge librarians have. You know, if I had a secret at this point that I would pass on to faculty, it would be send your librarian your syllabus. Send them the assignment description for when your students are using the library. You don't necessarily have to give them class time. I've had professors who said, I'm going to assign this to my students for extra credit. Okay. Right away I'm thinking to myself, oh, okay, so not everybody's going to come. But the people that are going to come are the ones whose grades are on the edge. The people that most need the library, most need the help, and I think would most benefit from it. So it's not a bad idea. Number one, I'll try just about any idea at least once, but I found that that actually does work a lot better than I thought it would because of who it's aimed at. And again, the faculty is the entree into that opportunity. Okay. We do currently have links to every course that takes people to subject pages, which are very helpful, and I think a lot of students do go in that way, and they do a lot of research and exploration themselves. We also try to you know, be very visible in that Ask a Librarian piece of things, so that they can come and ask specific questions when they have them. But I think being able to have the faculty promote the library, using the library, and the idea that academic resources really are preferred to Googling and to the internet is a really valuable thing, not only to the students, the quality of the product that they produce for that particular class and that particular learning objective, but it is a lifelong learning skill that they need to be able to do. So I think that that's very important. See, I may be getting ahead of myself. Oh, I know what I wanted to also share. I also do kind of in-depth things where there's a project that Usually it is a research paper type of a thing right now, but it could be just about anything. Or actually go in and I kind of share a strategy that would be logical for them to go about in doing the project, a little more in-depth type of a thing, suited to a particular assignment. What's nice about that is I've had several professors now say, do you mind if the students contact you after the class? And indeed, those students do contact you, and they set up a period of time where they can talk to you one-on-one and actually talk about specific resources, and it's great. Much more leisurely, it's much more focused on what their needs are, and it works really well. It's done outside of class, usually at the student's convenience, and that's fine. I either go where they need to meet, or I invite them to my office, my environment, and the libraries, but I've certainly done both. I've had the opportunity to teach an information literacy class at Rochester College, a small liberal arts college north of here. They have a 10-week, 1-credit class, okay? So basically you're getting 15 contact hours with the students. You have no problem at all filling up that time. It's billed as information literacy, which I think is actually the content that it covers. However, I'd like to really name it something that would be a little more meaningful to the students themselves, and I'd probably call it research skills, introduction to research skills, because I think the idea is that they do use those sorts of things, you know, on a lifelong basis. Information literacy is very broad in what it can encompass. It can be everything from plagiarism, copyright, online security, scholarly communication, which is how information is produced, disseminated, increasingly interactive. We do a session on Web 2.0 tools, and etc. It's growing. Just recently, they asked the librarians if they'd rather do 15 one-week sections rather than 10 1.5-hour sessions, and they said absolutely, because we can spread it out and actually cover more topics that way, having them do readings in between. This is a 1-credit class, okay? And it's not being expanded because they want to promote themselves and teach the class again. It's being expanded because there's that much to cover. I check in journals there. My old school role there is to manage the periodicals collection. They have about 200 paper journals that I physically check in. So I frequently look at their table of contents, and I'm seeing the information-related items explode, okay? Last night in particular, what did I have? Okay, Chronicle, free speech off campus must be protected, so we've got free speech in there. This was an interesting one. It's the title of the article, it's from Bloomberg Business Week, is A Pirate's Life for Sweden. And what's happened is Sweden, some Sweden citizens, have come up with the idea of being internet pirates, promoting internet piracy, because one of them was contacted by his lawyer about someone seeking his prosecution for facilitating copyright infringement. So they have formed this thing that they're calling the Missionary Church of Copism, K-O-P-I-M-I-S-M, and they hold sacred the act of copying information. The group adopted the keyboard shortcuts for copy and paste, Control-C and Control-V, as holy symbols. Yes, this is a little tongue-in-cheek, but it's a group of pretty serious people who are putting some effort towards this thing. I mean, it's a little higher on their priorities list than a joke, I think. In stark opposition to thou shalt not steal, the church's central commandment, copy and seed, is a call to download files and make them available for sharing. Their argument is that life itself depends on the replication of cells and the endless duplication of DNA. However, more than 5,000 people have signed on to this website. Okay, so again, we're seeing kind of this movement about how information is governed and about how we use it, bucking up against a lot of traditionally the way the world has worked. Who's willing to pay for online news? In Slovakia, which is why it first caught my eye, but when I started reading about it, I thought, oh, that's pretty pertinent. As news organizations worldwide wonder if they can charge for content that readers are accustomed to getting free of charge, 2 Eastern European countries have pioneered a new model, erecting national paywalls and charging a monthly fee for access to most of their newspapers. Now think about that. Right now, we could go to most newspapers and we can get today's news for free, accompanied by a lot of ads. Okay? I think we can see the dangers in that model and the changes that we've seen in that model about who controls information, who influences information, how information, is indexed, how it's put out there for people to consume. They do note in this article that media paywalls are proving difficult to implement. In the U.S., free access to information is sometimes seen as a citizen's right. I don't think it's free information, though, because it's coming with a lot of ads that are being pushed in, and that's of concern to me. Again, we talk to our students about these sorts of issues at Rochester, and we have them write papers, position papers, on this sort of a thing where they're out there looking for more information on it, and they have to brainstorm a lot of new ideas and ways to get at it. What's black and white and retweeted all over. Teaching news literacy in a digital age. This is from the Chronicle, I believe, and it kind of talks about, do we have to actually teach the skill of how to concisely say what you need to say for the fact that people are tweeting and blogging, and are those new skills that they need. Not just librarians, everywhere in the academy, this sort of thing is happening. The other thing, and I think you can very easily see how this fits in on it, is Secret 4, which is that we focus on the user experience. Now this is kind of cool, and it's relatively new in a real formal way in our library, although the concept has been around for a while. How long has that been, Judith? Maybe 2 to 3 months? Probably longer, I always think.
Since the summer.
Yeah, since the summer, pretty much. What used to be called information services librarians and others in the library that are in associated services are now called the user experience department, okay? User experience unit. So I kind of went out there and I thought, what's different about this user experience thing? And what I found is that it really has a pretty long history that I had encountered about, I'm going to say about 15 years ago now, which is kind of scary. But about the idea of being user-centered. That everything you do should be based on what your users' needs are. We are a service industry. We are a service unit. That's what we do. That's who we have to base things on. And you'll kind of think, well, of course that's what librarians do. That's what they're all about, is serving their patrons. I think the model has been skewed a little bit in most recent years because we focused very heavily on new technology. So we go out there and we get new technologies and we bring them into the library, we purchase them, we customize them and everything, and we push them out to our users. Okay, users, here they are. And I don't know that users necessarily need all those technologies. I think we're learning to be a lot more discerning. In other words, we have to keep our eye on the technology availability landscape. We have to be able to be knowledgeable about those things. We have to be able to pick and choose and know which aspects could be important to our users. But as far as being sold items anymore, I don't know if that's the appropriate model. Okay? And this is something, I encountered this back at the University of Arizona, which had a lot of team-based transitional things going on. But they call themselves a data-driven, user-centric, team-based organization. So the idea was they didn't make decisions on what they thought users wanted, which is pretty easy to do when you just witness how they use them. They would actually ask patrons. They would base it on actual data that could be categorized, manipulated in ways that it was aggregated and organized, not manipulated in ways we wanted to use the information. The idea is that decisions were based on what users were saying and what they were doing. Okay? What I saw then was a real sea change of the way things were happening. We frequently had to take ourselves out of the equation, which is really hard for any organization to do. It can't be anymore the way you've done business. For example, I really like the idea of my workday being 8 to 5. Okay? That's great. Everybody likes an 8 to 5 workday. what we find is that our users are working into the evenings. What does that mean for, remote access, remote reference service? It means we have to be there to provide it. It's a different model of working, a different way to do that, and it might be one we don't prefer, which is where the really hard part comes in. At Arizona, what they ended up doing was splitting it up. Everybody had an overnight, and that's kind of the way you started doing business. They tried overnights, they scaled it back. There's different ways these things were adjusted once they collected data on what was really happening. But the idea was not to do it based on what you think is best, which is how we've always set up expert roles, okay? It's the idea that the expert is the person who can ask questions, who can gather the data, and who can actually use that data in making an effective decision, test it, and then evaluate it overall. When you put into that equation the fact that it's changing continually, librarians have plenty to do. Don't worry about that. I'm not worried about librarians going anywhere at this point. Again, last night, what patrons teach us, this one happens to be from Library Journal. It's a library journal, so you would expect this. And it's kind of a public library perspective, but they're talking about the power patron, and what they find about the power patron is that the power patron is defined by reading single books on multiple devices. Okay, so they're not just downloading a book to their iPad and that's where they're going to read it. They're not just doing one thing with it. And, I kind of looked at this at first and I thought, oh, come on. Then I thought about the way I use information. I do that all the time. If I want something immediately overnight, I may pay the $10 to get it downloaded to my Kindle. If I want to read the whole thing cover to cover, I'm going to get a paper copy because I don't want to read it. And right there, you're seeing the same item with multiple uses. They borrow movies, CDs, and games from the library. So the library does have other roles that they're still coming to the library for, but it's not the same traditional ones that it's always been. The ranking of library databases, power patrons, to a larger degree than all of their survey respondents, said that the library is the second place to go for online digital content. The first place to go, quite a few of them also marked that, but it was less than the fact that it's the second place to go. However, power patrons had the library in either their first or second place to a larger extent than any other group of patrons, okay, that identify themselves as any other group of patrons. So what is it? The library is still present in their thinking, okay, it's still there. Are they using probably the internet? That's what I would suspect it is. I don't think they asked the question that way. But that's definitely what it's pointing to. I also saw a really interesting one based on Dartmouth librarians, okay? And what they said is, rather than evaluating products, we like to step back and say, what do we want to do? So again, you're seeing that change from saying, I want the newest thing that's out there, I want to do it like other institutions are doing it with this new technology, stepping back and saying, what do my patrons need and want? How can I fulfill their need? It's a very interesting article. Let's see. Dartmouth has a long tradition of thinking about its users. They also talked about the beta process, really challenged us and pushed us and made us think in ways that we probably hadn't seen before. So what we're seeing is a real learning from patron data, not using data to support what we think we're going to do anyway. Okay? Very different way of thinking. Let's see what else I had. The very last one that I want to bring up, actually I want to turn it over to you, is that librarians are information practitioners. Okay? We exercise the art, science, or profession of information engagement. We practice to acquire or maintain proficiency. There's a lot to keep up with, is what it comes down to out there. We keep up and we evolve with information practice. We engage in public practice. In other words, because we are interacting with people that need information, it is our duty to stay up to date with that and be able to provide the highest quality information, the most current information, et cetera, that we can. The biggest part of this is that collaboration is what really helps us to learn and focus and develop. One thing that I wanted to bring up very quickly, and in fact I am going to try to go to the web here. Let's see. I can't touch certain chords here, so I'm being very careful about that. Okay. Looks like my web pages. Let's see. Here we go. Under guides on our homepage, one of the neat things that we've set up, and I think this kind of came out of a lot of scholarly communication initiatives. It was kind of something that we set up in advance, knowing the technology was available. I would say that we weren't sure exactly what would happen here. Way down here where it says how to miscellaneous guides, there's a link to scholarly communications. I'm going to go in this way because there's a lot of information surrounding this, digital commons that I wanted to be able to kind of point out to you. Over there where it says got a project, okay, kind of assuming a little bit of idea that you know what this thing is, a digital depository type of an idea, but it's also not limited to that. Let me see what I've got. It also lists the other things that are available on this page. Information about authors' rights, copyright transfer, publishing, what the open access information is. Again, this isn't something that everybody has a constant need for, but certainly if you're active in publishing, there are things that occasionally you're going to want to engage with and find out more information about, and your librarian can help you with those sorts of things. The one thing I wanted to point out was the digital commons, which was kind of something that we got into. What the digital commons is an institutional repository, in other words, a place where we can basically store information and access it. Okay, so it's put up for scholars to use to be able to deposit their work. Okay, and they may have a variety of reasons for wanting to do this. It could be because they want to be able to give their students access to it and their colleagues access to it, and it might be something that otherwise the institution would have to pay for, that it's freely available. It could be where they kind of want to claim a topic. There's all kinds of reasons for why they would want to do this. It's set up in a variety of ways to get to it. We have quite a few theses and dissertations. We also have the WSU Press journals in here. But basically, we have at least one material from all these particular areas. I'll go ahead and just click on this one really quickly. These weren't things that I had gone out and asked to be put into the digital repository, so they were basically things that came in by either another librarian asking or some exposure to them outside of my doing the personal connection. But there you've got basically theses and dissertations that are in there. And we can just click through and get access to these without having to go through any other formal ways of getting to them. The other one that I wanted to show you here was the University of Illinois. I think this one has been in existence a little bit longer. From their homepage, we can click on library, and it's actually called Ideals. You kind of have to know what the name is, so it's a little bit different that way. It uses a different type of software, and one of the things that I particularly like about it is every so often I get an email from Ideals that tells me what new things in my area someone has deposited into their depository. Okay, I'm pretty sure we probably have that functioning. The software we use is very up to date. I don't have it set up yet. I don't know if any other librarians do, but that's a possibility, a nice feature for how this happens. Anyway, the group that works on this, it's the scholarly communications team. We try to keep up in this area, and we pass that information around to our colleagues in the library. The other day we were listening to a presentation, and the main thing that was conveyed is, okay, you've got this technology, it's up. Don't go out and ask, tell patrons what it is and say, hey, and you can contribute to this. go out there and basically embed yourself in the academic units enough to be able to say, what are the needs of the unit, and is this a possible solution to that? Are there things that we need to do to develop our digital repository so that it can meet specific needs that users have? But again, basically that's what the presenter was saying, is it's time to not look at the technology, put it out there and tell people they can use it, but to go out there, find out what needs are, and then see what possibilities can match it. And, let me see, I think that is formally what I've got today. Yes. And so what I really wanted to do was open up the floor to you to be able to talk about certainly any of these 5 points. I've got flip charts so that we can capture things on sticky notes. But I've also got one where if the taxonomy that I've talked about in the secrets that we want to tell people hasn't worked, if there's something out there that is something that a librarian or somebody here wants or needs to know and it doesn't fit into it, that we could also capture that. So the floor is open.
When I was an undergraduate, the internet came to campus. It was when they installed the wiring. And so all of a sudden, Netscape and Yahoo and all this. And so I think of myself as being one of the last generations of, or the oldest person to know how to go to a library and and actually navigate the stacks. In the sense that there's some piece of information that I want. You type it into this library catalog, point you to a place on a shelf, and the thing that you go to the shelf for isn't what you want.
Okay.
Or it's just it's a place where you go, and then it is the searching of the material around that is how you actually find something. And it may not even be the first place you stop. And it seems to me that today, some of this with Google, but it's not the same. And with more stuff only being available digitally, how would you suggest we kind of replicate that old process or skill that's being lost?
Well, there are still subject taxonomies where it'll work and you can find the thing that is sequentially next to it. In other words, more of the same around it. I guess what I would challenge people with is, because the physical arrangement of similar subjects being together was what we were always used to. I certainly do a lot of research that way still. Have we overlooked other relationships that information has? Is the preference we have for that physical arrangement necessarily better than other types? And, so it's always, because I might have that huge sense of loss too, in saying, wait a minute, there's all kinds of stuff out there electronically that I'm not seeing because I'm standing here at the shelves. I think it's the enabling of more options rather than necessarily losing it. There are ways that we could look at a catalog and you could actually see the items electronically that were next to it on the shelf. What you could also see right along with it were the electronic items that were never on the shelf that are still on the top.
Okay, may I make a comment, since this was my area of research for many years? Any organization of information will privilege some scholars and disprivilege others. And so if you happen to be one of these privileged scholars, you're lucky. But if you're in a new subject like gerontology, then you're going to have to run all over the library and tell in a way you're not privileged. And so, yes, that works if you're lucky, but if you're not lucky, that's not going to be the way that's going to help you very much.
I guess as you were talking, it kind of got me to thinking, I take out my iPad, and I'm just amazed at what I could have on this thing. I mean, there's an app for so many things now. I mean, I noticed that like on my iPad, I've got over 200 free books. I haven't paid for any of them. And then I can compare editions, which edition I'm looking at.
Yeah.
And then I found out a site where an app where I can listen to books for free. There are hundreds of books that I can pick out and listen to and carry with me. Then when I want, I can go to the media site and compare that to something else. And I began to think about the iPad as sort of an information collection. It's sort of like a place where you can just pick out as much information as you want and in the sorts and arrangements that you want,
Yeah.
and then do it with what way you want. And then you can combine information, the media, then you can take the print, and you can sort of mix them all together.
Yep.
And so I got thinking the iPad. Then when I bought a little keyboard for it, I could begin to really type out. I don't know how to quite connect to the cloud yet, where I could download this other stuff and then connect to something else. But it began to get me to thinking that the iPad is a whole new approach. And I thought, well, of course, when I think I've got 200 books on my iPad, I mean, well, what's going to happen? I mean, I've got a whole library I carry with me now. So what is this going to do? I mean, the access, kids are just so blasé about information. Well, okay, I can look up in here and look it up over there. I mean, before it was like, and then I've noticed that there's another thing going on, that different libraries, there's this sort of underground selling of old books for cheap. You can get an old book. I've gotten huge books that were like, for a couple bucks. And I'm wondering, this is kind of like adding funding to the library. So it seems like a whole bunch of things is going on, an electronic revolution, and a sort of like a financial change going on. So is this sort of placing the academic situation in a whole new area? Because how do you even begin to think about the way you process information?
Well, I mean, I'd say that there are certainly challenges there. That's why I'm not too worried about librarians not having a future and not being busy, because there is just so much, just sheer volume of material available, decisions to be made regarding it. Now, to me, it's the evaluation question there. What I find is that the most current, the most scholarly, the best cutting-edge information still costs money. You can get a lot of things for free, but not everything for free. And frequently what you most need, the highest quality information in terms of currency and comprehensiveness and actual supported factual data, would still be the premium information that institutions pay for, and that our users have free access to because the institution pays for it. But that information is not free because it's through the library. The library's paying a lot of money for it, and that's what we have to remember. And as librarians, we're the managers of that resource, which is huge. Yeah. But really, we can create our own information environment. Are we going to remember to update it every 2 weeks so that we're getting the absolute latest thing out of there? And there's still all kinds of information management issues and questions and strategies that are embedded in all of that. So yeah, it's a really exciting environment.